never just hold me. Take my hand and tell me I'm the only one when I need. And I'm craving for the chances that we should be taking, the memories that we should be making. But you're not here. I need something to get me through the days until you're coming back to me.
I would say burlesque is sort of striptease with a story, and obviously the historical part of it is, you know, it's a song and a dance and a performance. My interest was really in acting before burlesque. I moved up to Glasgow, and so once I was settled in, I decided to go out and find out what was out there. I went to a club, and I really liked what I saw, and I thought, this is fantastic. It was so glamorous and it looked really exciting. So I found out they were doing a workshop, so I went along, and I've not looked back since. I just absolutely love it.
I've always had a love for performing from a very young age, so it was kind of like almost a natural direction to go in.
There's lots of different kinds of burlesque which people don't realise. The field that I most like is sort of old-fashioned burlesque, where the emphasis is on the tease, not the strip. It's about being classy, glamorous, leaving more to the imagination, not just about walking on stage and stripping down to nipple tassels. It's, you know, there's so many burlesque performers who are really good, could just take off a glove and it could be the sexiest thing ever. So that's kind of what I like about it.
I would say I definitely draw inspiration more from modern types of burlesque, and from kind of wider popular culture in general, kind of things like adverts and movies, older films, I guess, particularly sort of Busby Berkeley. In terms of older burlesque performances, really only for things like fan dancing, kind of obviously Sally Rand, Noel Toy, characters like that.
I would say my influences actually come from like old musical films, like for example, in White Christmas you've got the Haynes sisters that do their fan dance at the beginning, and in Calamity Jane when they have Adelaide Adams, you know, she's a big pin-up star and she does this burlesque performance, so I think old films like that.
Zachary Dusk has been a really big influence on me because we've been friends and I've seen her perform more than anybody else.
My name's Zachary Dusk and I'm a burlesque performer. I've been performing for almost 3 years now. The themes and styles of my performances have changed a lot since I first began. As it developed, I was trying to look for more interesting and unusual things to put in, because that's part of the beauty of modern burlesque, is the kind of variety. So I began doing a Highland fling, which is quite unusual, and I also do some kind of contortion stuff. And it can be anything from kind of traditional Marilyn Monroe type things to sort of rock and roll modern day, whatever suits the event.
Glasgow has a big influence in burlesque. It has a big burlesque culture.
I think Glasgow's been a really important city. We've obviously got the Glasgow Britannia Music Hall, the oldest surviving music hall in Britain and possibly the world.
Well, the Britannia Panopticon Music Hall is a conservation project, and what we're doing is we're trying to raise the money to conserve the building and restore certain features of it. And as a result, as part of the fundraising, we do allow certain events in here. We do music hall afternoons, we have Laurel and Hardy film nights, we have the occasional live band, we have, for example, 2 shows in during the comedy festival, so we still encourage new comedians like the young Stan Laurel. And of course we also do the odd bit of work with the Academy of Burlesque and Cabaret, which I believe is now the Ministry of Burlesque Academy. This building has an immense history. Of course it's a music hall, which means it's a kind of different thing altogether than a theatre. So this is what a music hall is, and this is the earliest surviving music hall that we know of anywhere in the world. The main attraction were the dancing girls, because the can-can had kind of been revived, and by the early 1860s was to be seen in pretty much every music hall across the length and breadth of the British Isles.
I think contemporary burlesque is very much linked to the past. I mean, there's balloon pops, fan dances are still very, very popular, and there is a kind of nostalgic glow around the sort of golden era, which was like the 30s through to the 50s. So it's very, very heavily influenced by the past, but I think it just incorporates a lot of other genres now because it started out underground. It's taken in things like punk and rockabilly and other things like that and kind of incorporated it all. So it's very much a fusion of the past and kind of present stuff as well.
I'm probably influenced by both the traditional style of burlesque and the modern burlesque. Like in a recent routine, which is quite modern burlesque, I have a pair of green skulls which I dance with and drum on their heads. So that's very much kind of more modern burlesque as opposed to traditional. But there's lots of different types of burlesque styles emerging all the time.
Burlesque is basically comedy. The word burlesque itself comes from the burl, which is the stick that comics used to hit each other with, yeah? Which is where, of course, slapstick comes from. So you could say that slapstick and burlesque both have the same origin in this one stick called the burl. And the whole idea of burlesque was parody. It wasn't comedy as in just being funny and looking funny. It was actual parody. You have to parody something. The naughty bit of burlesque was the fact that they exposed an ankle. In fact, when they were burlesquing men, they'd be wearing pantaloons, which meant they exposed an ankle all the way up to the knee. That was really naughty in the 1860s. So that's really, I suppose, where you could say the modern tradition of burlesque comes from, is the fact that it was a bit risque in their day. Today, you see children's presenters wearing less than the burlesque performers of the 1860s.
At the heart of a lot of burlesque, there is striptease. So there are women on stage taking their clothes off for the entertainment of the people in the audience, and there's always ways that that can be misinterpreted.
The idea of burlesque that's entered the public consciousness is quite a narrow one, and it is centred very much around stripping, around tease, and around women taking their clothes off, which isn't really all that it's about.
I always find it interesting the different opinions people have on burlesque. So anyone who isn't sure about what burlesque actually is, I would urge them to go along to a burlesque show and find out for themselves.
If someone was interested in performing, the first thing I would tell them to do would be to do as much research as possible to kind of get an idea of who's in the scene, what's going on, what's currently out there. And once they've done that, probably tell them to do a little bit of research on the history of burlesque.
If people are interested in getting into burlesque, there's loads of opportunities now. There's a lot more going on now than when I started out. In Scotland alone, there are classes in Edinburgh, Glasgow and Aberdeen, weekly classes in Edinburgh and Glasgow with the Ministry of Burlesque, and they also run kind of one-off workshops.
It's not really for everybody, but I think you really have to learn to get that stage presence. I think that's a really important thing when you're performing. So yeah, get along to some workshops, some classes, and really work on your stage presence.
I think the best way to do is in your own house, in your bedroom, get comfortable, get a routine, and then approach somebody at a club once you've got all your ideas fully in place and you've got the confidence, and then hopefully they'll give you a shot.